Little Horse and Big Conversation. Welcome to Little Horse and Big Conversation, where we give them their say, let the horse guide the way. Here at Little Horse and Big Conversation, we have the choice, so let's give them a voice. Here at Little Horse and Big Conversation, Little Horse and Big Conversation.
Hello and welcome to this next episode of the Little Horse Big Conversation podcast with me, Amy Mitchell, and my co-host Ross Cooper. Today we've got another interesting little topic, and we want to talk to you about ways to be able to measure progress without pressure. So that's pressure to you and pressure to the horse. So Ross, where should we start?
Well, I think this is going to be a really interesting topic, but before we get into this, I would like to hear all about David Landreville's visit to the UK, which I had the pleasure of attending and you had the pleasure of hosting.
Yes, it was awesome. So for anyone who doesn't know of David Landreville, David is a hoof trimmer from the United States of America, and I followed his stuff for quite a while. And then last year, so early 2024, I went over to one of his clinics over in the States to kind of learn more about what he did. Because I could see he was getting really good results on some horses that I'd kind of plateaued on, similar sorts of feet. He was still getting improvements on. So I was like, this guy's got something I need to learn. So I'd gone out to one of his clinics, learned his techniques, or some of it, what you can learn from a clinic, and came back and took a small group of clients' horses. I think I had 10 horses in the group that over a 6-month period used David's techniques and made some changes to my trimming schedule and so on to see how it would go. Took gait assessments, took lots of photos, kind of recorded the progress throughout the 6-month period, and I would say that all of those horses improved, and mostly kind of over and above what I would have normally expected to see over that period, which made me then think, this is great, this is the way forward. So I then changed my whole business model as a result, and kind of rolled out this new approach to all of my clients. So for me, that's been that's been a big influence on me and the way I work. So when I then got the opportunity to be able to host David here, it was like, yes, this is definitely something that we have to do. So it was really cool. So I think there was about 50 people at the clinic. There was 12 of us that were doing sort of practical stuff, and everyone else observing. But it was really cool as well, because there was loads of other trimmers there. Some of my Orion trimmers, but also some EPA trimmers, and some that had done the liberated horsemanship course, and trimmers of all sorts of different sorts. So it was really cool as well to catch up with loads of other people and kind of see what they're doing and talk about stuff and share some ideas. And but yeah, the actual trimming was great, and I felt like I picked up some new tricks and tips myself. But for me, I really enjoy watching David work and the way that he does things. Like, I think he's really inspirational, the way that he works with the horses, and he's constantly looking for feedback from the horse about the trim itself. Seeing, doing a bit, putting the foot down, having a look, seeing how the horse responds to that, which I think is not something that you tend to see, and is something that I've tried to incorporate more into my own work. So kind of seeing some more of that, but also getting him having a look at when I trimmed Jasmine's feet and getting some really positive feedback from him was lovely too. So yeah, it was a fantastic weekend. I don't know, from your perspective, how did you find things? You were obviously there as an observer.
Which actually I really enjoy, because I get as much out of doing as I do from watching. Because I think I was possibly was I maybe the only person there who wasn't within hoof care?
No, there were a few interested owners, some that are our owner trimmers, and some that are our owners. And there was another lady there who's a chiropractor. So yeah, it was mostly hoof people, but there were a few others sprinkled in amongst us.
So the first thing that struck me was the fact that, as we're all aware, the hoof care community has been pretty divisive recently. So what was really nice was all the people there mingling with each other, exchanging ideas, and it felt quite an open, safe space for everyone to be able to do that. So it was really nice to see that. But from my perspective, like you said, I don't think it's not something you very commonly come across of someone talking about trimming, but talking about biofeedback, the body's response to subtle adjustments in the hoof, which, given how sensory the hoof is and all the structures that along with the rest of the body, it's a given, but it's not something which is widely taught or even accessible. So I thought it was really interesting to be able to see that in person because obviously I've seen you trim and I think it's fantastic how you work. So it's nice to kind of see where that came from.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, I think it's really inspirational to kind of, and I think, even I mean, I think his trimming techniques are fantastic, and I think they really do genuinely help with building up the structures in the back of the foot. But I just think even if you don't take on board any of the trimming, I just think that side of looking at the responses from the horse and taking on the horse's feedback, I think is really cool. And once you start doing it, think, gosh, why why wasn't I doing this all along? It's like one of
Yeah.
those things, isn't it? So yeah,
When you see it,
it's
you
really
can't
interesting.
unsee it.
Yeah.
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 So in a way, that links on
Well, it
directly to
does.
today's topic, which is progression without pressure
Yeah,
and different ways.
beautifully segued there, Ross.
Did you like
Yeah,
that? We're
yeah.
getting smoother at this, aren't we? We're getting smoother.
Absolutely. We're on a roll. We're on a roll. Yeah.
So I think this is a really interesting topic, and I remember you sending the email about this after having some thoughts on it. So this is Amy's baby. So I will let her lead the way with this one.
Yeah, so I feel like and I think this is a quote that we've used in a previous podcast, but there's that Theodore Roosevelt quote of the comparison being the thief of joy. And I think we as human beings and very much in the horse world have a tendency to look too much to what is going on elsewhere and to compare ourselves to what everybody else is doing and the progress that other people are making and the speed at which they're making that progress, and to kind of beat ourselves up a bit if we're not progressing at the same rate as somebody else.
Agreed.
And it can become kind of negative, and I think I know that sometimes, in the barefoot hoof space, that can lead to people kind of feeling a failure, and potentially, putting shoes back on the horse, which, I don't have an issue with people putting shoes on their horse, but I think sometimes it happens for the wrong reasons and at the wrong point. And I think if we can kind of, for want of sounding really cheesy, take more of a look at the journey rather than the destination, and look at the little positives, and kind of benchmark where we're at when we start with something, whatever that process might be that we're wanting to change and improve, and then look for the little wins rather than being, you need to have an idea of where you want to get to eventually, but rather than being really kind of goal orientated and focusing on that kind of possible distant star of where you want to get to, by looking at the little wins and the little positives along the way, I think that's a much more satisfying place to work from. And I think in the end, the success that you achieve is likely to be greater because you're not putting yourself and the horse under pressure to achieve something in a unrealistic time frame.
Yeah, and I think you are learning more within that process as opposed to being very direct line thinking, which from time to time we all do to some extent. but you appreciate all the little steps that go into that process. And it just, just listen to what you're saying there. Why do you think it is that we are so fixated on goals and rigid timelines? Do you think that is an external or an internal aspect or a combination of the two?
I think it's probably a combination of the two. I have a reasonable amount of insight into kind of change psychology, because that used to be my area of work back in the day when I was working in a commercial environment. I worked in process improvement and change. So although that was working in a commercial environment, the way that people look at change is the same in any aspect of life. We're quite predictable creatures in terms of behavior. And there's something that I teach to the Orion Academy students that I think is really relevant, and I think is something that I will also sometimes share with owners when I'm talking to them about whether or not they want to take shoes off or make other changes for the horse. And it's something I'll share some information about this for anyone that wants to learn more about it on the Facebook page. But it's a thing called the Satir change model. And I think this research was done back in the 70s, so a while ago now. But it's really relevant. And what it basically is saying is that usually when we decide to make a change on something, there's an expectation that change, that improvement is going to be linear. So you start at whatever the current status quo is. So we'll use hooves as our example. So let's say you've got a thoroughbred with really weak feet, collapsed caudal structures, and your vision is to go from that point to having a horse that you can hack out fairly comfortably without hoof boots. The general expectation is that you take the shoes off and that you have this linear improvement over time from one status quo to the other. But actually that's not what happens in reality. And in reality, what tends to happen is in any change process, you'll start off with a degree of resistance. So you're used to doing something a certain way. There's a lot of reasons why resistance occurs. So we can talk about that separately. But once you kind of overcome the resistance and decide to actually, okay, yes, this is the change I'm going to make, things will start to feel a bit messy and disrupted, and this is the stage where kind of mistakes will happen. The owner perhaps gets a bit lax about putting the hoof boots on to walk the horse out to the field across the gravel, and the horse is sore, and then the horse continues to be sore the next day, and the owner feels really like, oh my gosh, this isn't working, things are going badly, and you'll end up with an actual dip in performance at this stage. And very often, in the and I would assume it's pretty much the same for everything, but it's what I would certainly see in the hoof space, is that when you get this dip in performance, that's the point at which people will say, oh my goodness, this isn't working for me. And we'll go back to the old process. So they'll put the shoes back on the horse and be like, this barefoot thing didn't work for me. But actually, if you can kind of work your way through that chaos stage and understand what's causing it and put your proper transformation steps into place, you'll then start to get the improvements and start to see things getting better, and you'll go through then a sort of an integration phase, and things will improve, and you'll then gradually over time reach your new status quo. So having to use the hoof boots with pads in, then not having to put the pads in and just having the boots, and then being able to walk over certain surfaces without boots, some surfaces with boots, and then getting to the point hopefully where, if everything goes to plan, you can hack out without needing the boots at all. Obviously that's a simplified version of the other things that would need to be going on, but that's what happens with any and all change processes to some degree or other. But I think it kind of highlights the fact that if you're really goal focused on that new status quo, it can be really demoralizing when you get a dip, or if things aren't going as fast as you want. Whereas actually, if you can contextualize it with knowing, okay, things might get worse before they get better, but I know where I started and I'm going to document that and I'm going to look for little changes, little improvements, and then you'll start to see that snowball. But by looking for the little things and taking all those little wins along the journey, it becomes a much more positive and satisfying space to work from than, oh my gosh, that goal is so far out there and things are going wrong, and I'm going to put more pressure on to make things happen more quickly, and then even more things go wrong. And so, yeah, I think it's an interesting context to look at things in.
Definitely. There's one thing that always really interests me, and because this has previously been a big part of like your professional area, and obviously
Mm,
you integrate it in working with the students, which I think is really, really cool because a lot of that I wasn't aware of. So every day's a school day.
indeed.
Um, so in your experience, why and how do you find people so resistant to change? What
Okay,
is it
so
about change?
there is a formula, but I won't bore people with the formula. But essentially, in order if someone wants to make a change, they need to be dissatisfied enough with the current situation to feel it's worth making a change. So if you're only a little bit dissatisfied with the way things are, and actually putting a change in place is going to require quite a lot of effort, you're not going to do it. So to start with, the person has to be pretty unhappy with the way things are. They then also need to be able to see like a vision of how things could be if they make the change.
Okay.
So
So can I jump in there very quickly
yeah,
before I lose this? So we can come back to this later, but in case I forget this,
yeah,
within within the generalized community, do you
yeah.
feel that a lot of people working with their own horses feel stuck and can't see the wood from the trees? They can't see what it could look
Yeah,
like.
absolutely. So there and I guess you probably see it in the horsemanship space as well. People have got an issue. So in my case, it's horses with shit feet. But potentially you're seeing behavior issues. They've got an issue, but they don't know how to get out of there. And they've got no vision of how things could be if they made some changes. It's just like I'm stuck in this horrible mess, but I don't actually know what to do about it. So I'm just going to stick my head in the stand and kind of carry on doing what I'm doing. Whereas if you can provide someone with a vision of this is how things could be. So let's use my thoroughbred with the rubbish feet again. You've got a horse that as soon as it loses a shoe is really sore and can't cope barefoot at all, and you're having to panic to get the farrier back out and the shoe keeps coming off because the feet are so weak. You're in this horrible kind of situation. Being able to say, but here's a horse over here that I can show you that was in the same space that you were in, who it's taken a while and we've had to go through quite a process. But look at this horse, it's now being ridden and its feet are quite strong and it can happily go over pretty much any surface. Maybe can't cope with chunky bits of gravel, but look, this is a clear vision of where you could get to. But then you need to be able to, but that vision seems so far away. So there's more
Yes.
ingredients that you still need for this. So you've got your sense of dissatisfaction and you've got your vision of how things could be, but that vision is like that's 100 miles away. How am I possibly going to get from here to there? So you then also need a first small step, like an easy, achievable step that you can make that is going to start taking you in that direction. So very often in my circumstance, that'll be, okay, well, let's look at your horse's gut health and your horse's diet. Let's just start that horse growing some stronger hoof horn. And if you can give people just an initial first step and an idea of how that journey it might go, it's
Yes.
easy. And people will then say, okay, yeah, I can see where I'm at. I'm really unhappy with this. I'd love to get over there. I know that's not going to happen instantly, but yes, I can take this one little small step. And
Yes,
that's within
yes.
my control and I feel comfortable with it.
And I do think it's, to for the want of a better analogy, people get so far down the sewage pipe that they don't want to turn back.
100%.
And I think I think, that can be, just sticking with the theme, that can be linked into so many different forms of pressure. I think a lot of people, again, we're a little bit fragmented as a community. We don't always have a open-minded growth mindset support network around us. And I do think that sometimes if you don't have, if you aren't surrounded with the company that have you and your horse's interests at heart, I think it can be a lot harder to be able to try and figure something out. So you have a level of pressure externally, and I think this is a massive theme throughout. You have pressure from peers, you have pressure from other professionals and expectations, you have pressure from, maybe other professionals with that industry. So you've got a lot going off externally, and I think when you're in a situation when you want to do something which is something that you want to achieve or something that you feel at that point is right for you and your horse, I think the ego gets involved in a very protective way. And,
Yeah.
as much as you may think, okay, I'm not 100% sure about this, again, sewage pipe, I can't really backtrack. And it's, a lot of the time when people come to me specifically with issues physically or behaviorally, it's very much things that could have been picked up and worked on to a lesser degree earlier down the line, but it's effectively like Ross is the last port of call, which
Yeah.
is a phrase that I've had quite a lot. And, you know, there's never any judgment with that. I just feel a little bit sad that, people and horses have been in that situation to feel like there is a last resort.
And
So,
it's yeah, the same thing in feet. You know,
yes,
you'll often end up with people who've had all sorts of problems with their horse's feet that will then try barefoot as a last resort, which sometimes by that stage you've gone so far down the road that the rehab is massive.
yes, yeah.
Whereas if you take that step earlier on, you would get a better result quicker.
Yes, no, for sure, for sure. And
Um,
you've got, and then going from that, you've got the whole, because a lot of these, behavior, feet, body work, it can be so objectively subjective
yeah,
that it can be, for the majority of people, it can be a minefield that they feel they need to navigate through. So, as well as this external pressure of you can't do this or you should be doing that, that then obviously feeds that level of internal pressure, which all of us fear and face from time to time. So whether that, is self-imposed standards or expectations, even conditioning from younger years, if I change what I'm doing now, that means I failed. Well, it's not failure if you're learning something from it.
yeah, yeah,
You know?
absolutely. And that's such an
What?
important point.
Yeah, it's as long as you are learning, you are continuing along that pathway within that journey.
Yeah. And I
But
also
if you
think, like,
if you
on
can't
the
pinpoint,
failure point, like it's an emotive word, but actually, if you don't fail, you're not growing. Like you're not if you constantly stay within a safety of only doing things that you know you're not going to fail at, you don't
yeah,
get anywhere. Like
no,
the biggest learning moments I think I've ever had all come through failure. you do something, it doesn't work. And then you have to look at it and say, well, okay, why didn't it work? What can I learn from this? What can I do differently next time? Like, I think we should take more positives from it.
You're reframing it here because how we are now talking about failure, we are talking about failure as a lesson.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, what can we fail at next in order to actually get something better from that situation? Which actually is quite exciting, especially when it comes to our horses.
I think
Oh,
that's it.
and in life, and in life.
Yeah.
But I think the majority of people, when you hear failure, ego kicks in. No, I can't fail. I'm not failing. And then there's that defensive tendency to react to that, not respond, but react.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But when it comes to horses, don't be afraid to try something. Do you know what I mean? It's, try something, it might work. What's the harm in trying it once? Especially if you've been doing something which is not been, like you were saying, not getting the results that you want, but what's the harm in trying something a little bit different, which might improve your ways of going?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think having that openness, and it does take a lot to get to that point where you do have that openness. I think it just really opens up the conversation that you can have.
But I also think it's important, like, who you surround yourself with in these situations.
That is a big one. That is a big one because it is so. I mean, just literally, very, very recently, there's a horse that I've known. I've probably seen him monthly for about 6 or 7 months, and really lovely chat, but shows a lot of pain behavior under saddle.
Mm.
Okay, I've said his movement hasn't been right, that there's something going off. Everyone else I actually spoke to his person a few days ago, and I said, I'd like him to be referred to a different vet because they'd had two people involved,
Mm.
couldn't find anything, just get on, ride, da 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 da. Many other people have said there's nothing wrong, you just need to ride. PSD.
Oh,
And I'm like, there was something not right. And I think this relates quite a lot to what you just said. It depends who you surround yourself with. What are they looking for? What are they looking to gain from that interaction?
yeah.
And how they're looking to support you
Yeah.
within the context of what it
Yeah.
is you're both doing.
Yeah, because I mean, I know looking back to when I took shoes off Mary, the little thoroughbred that I started out my foray into the barefoot world with, I was on a fairly traditional livery yard. Um, and I remember, I mean, she was your classic thoroughbred that when she lost a shoe, she couldn't, it was like she had broken her leg. I mean, I didn't understand what was going on at the time, but she was so footsore, like, and her feet were so collapsed and underrun, and like the worst of what you see in terms of a thoroughbred foot coming out of racing. Um, and I remember walking her out to the field, and she was okay on the grass, but she was uncomfortable walking out to the field. And I remember someone coming over to me and saying, "Don't you think it's time you put shoes back on that poor horse?" Um, and I, being the pig-headed individual that I am, was like, "Well, absolutely not. This is, this is what I'm doing, and this is." Um, but it, she ended up with fantastic feet. Um, but I know that a lot of people would find that sort of peer pressure very uncomfortable. So surrounding yourself with people that are going to support you in what you're doing. I mean, I'm not suggesting that, that if people are doing things that are outrageous, or that are ill-conceived and are not intended for the benefit of the horse, that we should all be just going, oh yes, that's brilliant, do that anyway. But, if someone's trying to make a change for something that that is a thought out plan to do things better for themselves and for the horse, being supportive of that is important because nobody likes to be made to feel like they're not doing well, and it gets back to that whole comparison thing again, doesn't it?
Yeah. But no one should ever be made to feel like that, regardless whether they have been on the right track or a track that could do with some improvements. But I think that's the massive importance of, working collaboratively,
Yeah,
with trimmer, body worker, vet, trainer.
yeah, absolutely. Getting a good
They
team
work as a
involved.
whole. Yes, it's all about a good team because you can't, the more, the more I think things develop and come to light with horses, the more we know how complex
Yeah,
things are.
yeah,
And it does require a really good team who are aligned with where you want to go, that have the horse's welfare at the heart of things, and have you as a person, because it's a partnership, your best
yeah,
interests at heart with all of that. But be open to having a discussion. I think it's still quite a closed, it can be quite a closed industry in that sense, but all we then do is limit the help that we can bring to people and horses, improve the world for them.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So I
So I
think,
think,
collaboration is really, really, really important.
yeah, totally. Um, yeah, collaboration, getting the right people involved, feeling comfortable to kind of share concerns and that kind of thing. I think the other thing is, what once you're committed that you want to do something, I think it's really useful though to be able to baseline where you're at. Because
Oh,
it's really, really easy to forget where you started from.
yes.
And I know, with feet, because I will always, when I go out to a new client, I always take a full set of photographs of the feet when we start. Um, and then we'll take periodic sets of photos as we go on. And it's really interesting how
Yes.
you'll get 6 months down the road and a client will say to me, oh, but I feel like we're not getting anywhere and the heels are still contracted and this, that, and the other. I'll say, well, okay, let's just look back at where we started from. And you bring up the set of photos, and it's like, wow, okay, right, yeah, we've still got a way to go, but blimmin' heck, how much things have improved. Or, but do you
Yes.
remember when we started, your horse couldn't walk across, that concrete surface. They were uncomfortable on there. They were only comfortable on a soft surface if we didn't put the boots on. But now look, they're able to walk across that surface. So I think making notes of and taking photos or videos, like finding a way that works for the individual to record where you're at, and then really looking closely for the little wins,
Yes.
those
Yeah.
little incremental steps of improvement. I think that's really important because it's amazing once you kind of tune in and like looking for changes in posture and little behavior changes, little signs that the horse is sort of feeling less anxiety, less sort of reactivity to things, all these little signs and changes that you will see that if you're not looking for it, you might miss, or you might
Yeah.
start to take for granted and forget that it used to be a thing. I think
And
that if,
just with that,
yeah, go on.
sorry, go on. No, I interrupted Flo. Carry on.
Yeah, no, I was pretty much winding up there. So, but that really, if you can track your progress and celebrate those little improvements, it makes it into an exciting journey. And yes, you might have you'll have some bumps on the road, but you'll be able to start to see your way along this journey and that you're starting to head, using this analogy, you're starting to head towards your end destination.
Yes.
But if you
Yes.
don't if you don't know where you started from, you can feel like you're just getting lost.
I think I mean, it's so blindingly obvious. We all have our phones in our pockets,
Yeah,
but how many of us generally do take photos of before a session or after a session? And just with a couple of points that you made there as well, we spoke a lot about, pressure and progress with people, but what does that mean to the horse?
Yeah.
So from a horse's behavioral, like you say, behavioral and postural feedback, these are massive, massive considerations of how your horse is feeling about that situation. But again, like you've really, really nicely pointed out, all those little things like reduced stress behaviors, improvements in posture, emotional balance, curiosity, overreactivity, all of those little signs are things that are being presented to you by your horse to say that actually we're on the right track here.
Yeah.
And, a big one, which I do think people are getting better with, which is really, really lovely to see in the community, is being able to let the horse set the pace.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you working within your horse's remit and comfort guidelines? I mean, you know, giving them a sense of agency in what you're doing, but also taking the pressure off them. Taking the pressure off you takes the pressure off them. And I
Yeah.
think you can achieve a hell of a lot more by getting a little bit curious, doing a little bit less, like you say, still having those all important goals, but enjoying the journey to get there as opposed to being so fixated on the outcome.
Yeah. Yeah,
Because I think too much pressure just compromises the horse.
absolutely. Yeah. Well, I don't know about you, but I feel that's kind of a nice place to round it off, really.
I think that is. I think I could do with another matcha latte after that. I might go to Japan and collect some.
This this is a little in-joke comment because Ross dropped me a message via WhatsApp saying just making myself a matcha tea, I'll be there in a minute. And then like about 15 minutes later there was still no sign of him. So I did drop him a message to say, have you gone to Japan to pick the matcha?
I do think everyone who knows me is going to be nodding at
Yeah.
this in a
There will be
moment.
no surprise.
I suffer from time blindness. All right. On that note, now that I've been publicly shamed, thank you very much to everyone for listening in on today's episode of the Little Horse Big Conversation podcast. And we'll be back in 2 weeks' time with a very special guest.
Exciting times.
Little Horse and Big Conversation. Welcome to Little Horse and Big Conversation, where we give them their say, let the horse guide the way. Here at Little Horse and Big Conversation, we have the choice, so let's give them a voice. Here at Little Horse and Big Conversation, Little Horse and Big Conversation.